Every single day that I walk into that particular area and I'm treating my patient, I'm constantly reminded of
Mm-hmm.
what my
Mm-hmm.
life used to be. And so these memories would pop up as I'm doing these treatments, and I'm reminded of the compassion that I finally made for myself. And I can channel that compassion into my patients because I know what it's like,
Yeah, yeah.
because I've been in that hole and I could actually jump into that hole and say, hey, I could lead you out of here.
When the cold wind blows from the north, open up your door and seek wisdom. When the hot sunshine from
Welcome to the Light Warrior Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Show Me Music, the highest quality basses and bass amps, as well as guitar amps, digital mixers, powered speakers, and effects, with brands like Ampeg, Bergantino Audio, Blackstar, Gensler Amplification, Dingwall, and many others. Show Me Music is your premier dealer for the highest in guitar, bass, and audio gear. Check them out online if you're a musician or if you know a musician. ShowMeMusic.com. SHOME music.com. My guest today is Laurel Sonny Zaide. Sonny completed with honors the Masters of Oriental Medicine program at the Midwest College of Oriental Medicine in 2008 and currently runs the Purple Cloud Center for Eastern Medicine in Chicago. Having experienced tremendous anxiety and depression throughout his own life, he specializes in the treatment of emotional and spiritual wellness, such as stress, anxiety, depression, and PTSD, as well as the physical pain that comes along with emotional imbalances, such as insomnia, headaches, migraines, hormonal imbalances, and digestive issues. Sonny is a certified practitioner of clinical Qigong in the Stillness-Movement Lineage under the Institute of Chinese Energetic Healing, and nationally recognized as a Qigong instructor and clinical Qigong practitioner by the National Qigong Association. His unique synthesis of acupuncture, TCM, and clinical Qigong, coupled with his intensely rigorous cultivation practice, make him a formidable healer, able to get immensely impressive results for many emotional disorders that are intractable, poorly understood, and even more poorly treated by allopathic medicine. Sonny's dedication, expertise, insight, and compassion is truly awe-inspiring, and I have found that my own practice has deepened just from talking with him. Please visit purplecloudcenter.com and enjoy this conversation with Laurel Sonny Zaide. Welcome to the show, man. I'm talking to Sonny Zaide. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Zaide.
Zaide. Great to have you on. Thanks for making the time. Wanted to kind of get your take on the whole Qigong aspect from you're an acupuncturist and a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner. So those are probably fairly closely related.
Yeah, it's been quite a trip because it all started in my first quarter of acupuncture school. And one of my classmates, Chris, who was actually one of Michael's former students, but at the time he was a student. And Chris, introduced himself in class as, a Qigong or clinical Qigong practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I had been dabbling in various forms of Qigong via book, via the typicals, the Montauk Chia and Ken Cohen and Michael Wynn and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and Master Yang Jwing Ming, mainly him. And so that was the only form of Qigong that I knew of. I never even heard of, like a sort of clinical aspect of it. And
Like you were only familiar with Qigong for like personal cultivation for your own health, not as a treatment practice
Right.
for others.
Yes, exactly. And I found that intriguing. And so I remember one day we were all in the break room, and one of our classmates had knee pain. And since this was our first year of acupuncture school. We were not authorized to needle each other or treat each other, using acupuncture or any other modality, really. Chris said, okay, why don't you come by and see if I can help? And, and so, we all went by and checked this thing out, what Chris was doing. And so, she had knee pain. And so she sat down and Chris started, he did that whole projection thing, the two fingers and the palm, a few inches above her knee, and started making these weird finger sounds, and I was just looking at this. I was like, oh, what in the world is he doing? This looks freaking awesome. And then Chris goes, okay, I'm done. How do you feel? And she gets up and she starts kind of, shaking her leg a little bit and just kind of walk around. She's like, I feel much better. And I was like, what in the hell just happened here? And Chris turns to me. He's like, yeah, this is clinical Qigong. I was like, this is amazing stuff. And I was turned on by it right away. And it wasn't until quite possibly our second year. Actually, this was well into our second year. And Chris told me that his Qigong master Michael was having a workshop over in Terre Haute, and that's the closest he ever gets to Chicago. And he asked me if I want to go. I said, yeah, I'll think about it. It sounds cool. It was really tough because, just before, about 6 months before that, when Chris was telling me about the workshop, my father had passed away and we're taking care of my mom. I'm going through this acupuncture program, the master's program. I've got a young kid, I've got, work and, got all this stuff on my plate. And then Chris told me this really interesting but profound story. It was one day, wait, I need water for this.
What a long story.
Yeah. It was one day when Michael was having his workshop in Terre Haute, and Chris lives not too far from there, probably about a good half hour. It's really close. And so, Michael had visited his clinic. And there just happened to be one of Chris's clients there. It was a mother and son team. It was actually for the son, who was about 6 years old. 6-year-old had anxiety and depression because his legs are deformed. And how mean kids can get, right?
Yeah.
And so the mother, who happened to be a pharmaceutical agent, I want to say something like that, pharmaceutical sales rather, brought the kid in, and see what Chris can do to help him out. And Michael just happened to be there that day, and so what they did was they laid the kid down and they induced him into dream time, and before that, they did certain tests on him. They even measured his legs. So they laid the kid down and they got him into dream time. And the kid wakes up and Chris asks, okay, so what did you see in your dream? And the kid said, I saw both you and him. He was talking about Michael. And I said, okay, then what happened? What else happened in your dream? It's like, I began to run. So the kid started running in his dream. And the kid started, laughing and having fun in his dream. And they measured his legs, and his legs have grown a couple millimeters. And so this is what Chris told me.
They grew like right there, like right after the session?
Yes. It grew. They grew in real time at the time.
Wow.
He's also shown me pictures of of a client's legs that he worked on, who had diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And so he did a clinical Qigong treatment on this patient with the family there watching him. And all of them watched as this patient's or client's legs change colors in real time. So, I mean, I'm not sure if anyone is familiar when someone is going through late stage diabetes, they go through severe neuropathy to the point to
Right.
where the legs start changing colors because of severe dryness and what we call toxic heat in traditional Chinese medicine.
Mm.
And so he was able to, get the legs colors to change, which is on the surface, but beneath the surface was his intent to restore neuropathy and such. But he didn't really go into that in too much detail. What he did, though, was show me the photos, the before and after, and everyone watched as those legs change color real time. So, all of that being said, I told him, all right, where do I sign up?
Mm.
Okay, and so, whatever money I could dig up, whatever time I had to, sacrifice time from, because it's weekend classes. So, so I finally made it, and I met Michael. And this was in 2010. I want to say April or May, I forget.
Okay, so you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, I met him. Yeah, and it, needless to say, it blew my mind. And so coming from a TCM's perspective, okay, there's definitely, all the, the modality and the way that we're taught are obviously quite different.
You're talking about between traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine, or TCM and Qigong?
Between TCM and Qigong, or at least the way Michael teaches. I don't know how other schools teach, such as, I know that Jerry Allen Johnson and what's his name from Spring Forest, Chunin Lee or something like that. I forget his name. I don't mean to disrespect him like that, but Spring Forest Qigong, they're all, same sort of program where they use Wai Qi Liao Fa, healing projection. I don't know how they teach, but I know Michael pretty much goes right to the point.
Yeah.
All right. The contrast there between that and the way I'm taught in traditional Chinese medicine school, TCM school, is that, all right, first you meet with the patient, and you go through the subjective interview, which is basically what the patient tells you. Then you go through the objective, which is what you see in the patient, using observing, palpation, things like that. Primarily tongue and pulse. Those are the biggest things that we're trained on. And then you come up with a diagnosis based on what you see and what they say, and all of which should be corroborating. You come up with a diagnosis, and then you got a treatment strategy, and then you come up with a protocol. In Michael's program, and we learned this right away the very first time I met him, is that he pretty much surpasses all of that stuff. Of course, the patient's going to come in and say, "Hey, I'm coming in for back pain or anxiety and stuff," and then but under Michael's system, you don't have to take the tongue and pulse diagnosis. You can see exactly what's going on when you have enough practice under your belt. So it's quite an interesting contrast. But it was funny because as I was going home, I actually went to the workshop with Chris and one of my classmates, and Sean. And me and Sean were just, that whole 4-hour ride home, we're just like, what the hell just happened? This is an amazing thing,
What kind of things do you see when you're what do you watch for? What jumps out at you
when
you're ascertaining a patient?
Okay. It's really interesting, but because there's still an aspect of me that has
your TCM training, I'm sure, kicks in also.
Yeah, it kicks in. It definitely kicks in because, I mean, you spend 3.5 years doing it, and you got 1,000 hours of treatments, and about 700 patients, something like that. And so that's all in my nervous system. That's all in my energy body, and it just all kicks in. So it's kind of tough to say how I can discern what's TCM and what's pure listening and seeing, because all of it just
synergized together.
It's like that Taoist view of knowledge or wisdom. First you have the intuition, then you have the intellectual knowledge. When you put them together in the right manner, in the right way, that you can actually use it, it becomes wisdom with experience, obviously. And so it just becomes kind of all ingrained. But if I can make any sort of discernments, those discernments are things that TCM did not and could not train me in, which is using my listening and using my seeing, which Michael teaches us. I mean, for quite some time now, I'm able to actually see, stagnant qi in a patient, in their channels, whether it's acupuncture points, channels, or just random spots in the body, whether it's divergent channel or Luo connecting channels, things like that. But you could see it. It's there. If you can't see it, you could feel it. So that's, and right away, right when right when the patient rings the doorbell and you answer that door, you could see right away what's going on.
You can see where the blockages are, where the stagnation is, and how to approach it.
Not right away, but you could get the feeling that something. I mean, it sounds obvious. Like obviously they're coming to me because something is wrong, but it gets a bit more specific the moment you see them, and the moment they sit down and you're looking in and through them and around them, you could actually see it, the blockages and such. That's why a lot of times I just go right to the treatment. I mean, sometimes I may need some help here, because not everybody is a textbook case. Not everybody is. I tripped and fell and hurt my knee. Help me recuperate from this. In chronic pain, chronic disease, things like stress, anxiety, bipolar, psychosis, there's always a number of things that are occurring at once.
Right.
And that's where you really need to use every tool that you have, whether intellectual or innate wisdom, intuition, every experience, everything. And I do get a lot of those. I do get a lot of challenges, go ahead.
You've had experience with like full-blown kind of like psychosis, mental illness stuff, and you've had successes with that?
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what I focus on. It's actually my specialization.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. How do you find these people, or how do they find you? Like, one of the biggest problems with someone with mental illness is to convince them that they have a problem and they need to seek help. So how does that happen?
Well, first of all, it's exactly what I wanted to work on. Going back to TCM school, Midwest College of Oriental Medicine where I went was in was smack dab right in the center of the uptown neighborhood in Chicago. The uptown neighborhood has a lot of homeless shelters and rest homes for mentally ill, but not too mental. I mean, they can walk around and such. And at the time, my school's clinic was free to the public. You come in, you feel like having acupuncture, all right, just come on in. You just had to wait. And so because it was free, people had, it was always packed, and it was, and patients had to wait a long time. And that was my training ground for Shen disorder, spirit disorder. What we call in TCM is Shen, or spirit.
So they may come into you for something, whatever the sore on the leg, but then you see that there's a Shen disorder and you address that as well. Is that kind of how it goes?
Yeah. Or sometimes it's just blatant. Something's wrong here, and then you can discern what it is because of what they say. Sometimes they just make absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be flippant about it, but sometimes it's just so out there that you're just like, okay, I know exactly what's going on, and so that's just from like regular everyday kind of intuition. But as you go a little deeper into this program here that Michael has given us, you can actually see it. You can actually see what's going on. Sometimes what's going on is being played in the background, and you just kind of have to look into it. It's almost kind of like, and it's funny because I was talking to Michael about this. It's almost kind of like hacking a system with the viewing. I mean, we're kind of like hackers in a way.
Yeah.
And I'll explain that in a little bit. But with this training, if you give yourself enough time for stillness movement, raise your vibration, and focus on that emptiness when you're doing stillness movement, then you can actually see. You can actually press on that so-called Control Alt Delete, and you can see all the demons
get the task manager pop up.
Yeah. And you can see what's going on
That's
there.
a good way to look at it.
Exactly. You can see all those demons that's running, right? Or say, in this case, demons.
Yeah.
And so, it's a matter of which ones you need to click on to end the task. I mean, I know we're getting well ahead of ourselves here, but there have been times, or there is a technique that Michael showed us to actually hack into someone's own timeline.
Into your own timeline to correct something from the past that happened to you?
Or not own timeline, but into the patient's timeline.
Oh, into the patient's timeline. Right. Into
their own timeline. And that's a pretty advanced technique. And it was funny because it was talked to us casually over breakfast,
Right.
It tends to happen, in front of me and Ben and Harold. But anyway, so that was my training ground, and so I just had a knack for it. One of my most interesting patients, I'm not sure if you ever heard of Morgellons disease.
Yeah.
And for the longest time they just thought, okay, it's just this weird psychological disorder. I'm not sure what your view on it is, but from what I was told, go ahead.
I don't know too much about it. I've been hearing Joe Rogan's been bringing it up a bunch on his podcast, and okay. There's someone that he cites that has Lyme disease, who's actually like I think a biologist or a scientist, and like kind of diagnosing himself, he kind of came to the conclusion that, well, first of all, I think there's a big correlation between Lyme and Morgellons, and he was under the impression that it's the Lyme affects you neurologically and psychologically to where you start perceiving these symptoms and like, like these threads growing out of your skin and stuff. But he's under the impression that it's just a mental disturbance. But I don't really know much about it. I don't have an opinion.
Yeah, it's tough for me to have an opinion myself. I mean, I have dealt with a patient who had it. And I'm the only one that she wanted to see because I'm the only one who actually wanted to work with it.
Right. Everyone else is just like, you're crazy, get out of here.
Yeah, like everyone was like, they're either you're crazy or they tell me, hey, Sonny, you better be careful here, because no one knew what it was. I'm like, what if it's real?
Right.
What if I catch it? Now I got like these fibers in my body that's crawling under my skin. So for everyone who doesn't know what Morgellons disease is, it's basically the feeling of little, like worms or parasites underneath the skin, which are allegedly long strands of fiber, proteins that just come out like worms out of your pores, whether it's fingers or hands or whatnot. My particular patient had it coming out of her hands all the time, allegedly.
So the problem there, I assume, is that the patient sees these things, but if you were to just look, an outside observer does not see this.
Yeah, I personally didn't see one on her, but here's an interesting thing: is that one of my classmates, who was actually doctoral's resident in Midwest's program, he said. And these are his words. He said that they're real. He told me he has jars of it at home, and he does, and he has tests, and he tests them, and he said that they won't burn. They won't burn until it reaches like a ridiculous temperature.
Well, that's the other kind of crazy part about Morgellons, is it kind of always goes hand in hand with some outlandish conspiracy theories with like alien tech and nanotech and chemtrail and like that makes it much harder to swallow for most people.
Yeah, and and that's the thing, is that I didn't put weight in this young man's thing, because he was also very much one of those kind of people too.
And I'm one of those kind of people, really, myself. Well, I'm into all that weird stuff, but I kind of take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, me too. I entertain the idea. Some of us might have alien DNA. Maybe everyone from Norway are absolutely stunning because they have that alien DNA. Who knows?
Sounds like someone's got a fetish.
Hey.
Well, I often think about this. This is a little bit of a digression, but when you think about the human species, like, we're just so different from anything else that exists on the earth. The way we interact with everything, and where that comes from. There's a lot of crazy theories and whatever, alien DNA, Anunnaki, stuff like that. Another possibility is that just there's a lot of evidence pointing to us having gone through like a massive cataclysm at some point in our history, some kind of cosmic impact, whatever, and maybe we just had to like adapt as quickly and like an emergency adaptation to a species survival by whatever, grow your brain extra large in a neotenous stage and be smarter than everyone else. But I don't know. Who knows where it comes from? But we're definitely not like any other species on this earth. So it's I think about that stuff all the time.
We're definitely quite different. I don't know. I don't know what to think of all of that. I think about the human ego a lot. Because I specialize in Shen disorder. A lot of Shen disorder is because of, the type of ego that we've evolved. And, I think about back in the olden days, not that I was there, but, we're quite small and weak compared to a lot of animals.
Mm-hmm.
But what Mother Nature gave us was a little bit of cunning.
Mm-hmm.
And that cunning quite possibly evolved into even more so cunning.
Mm-hmm.
And even more so that even though we couldn't quite fight these animals hand to hand, like our fists versus their jaws, we can create a sort of environment in which we can dominate them,
Mm-hmm.
and I would suppose that things evolve from there, and tying all this back into Shen disorder, a lot of what I see is based off of stress and anxiety, deep, PTSD.
Right, right.
You know, I'm getting way ahead of myself when I say that I think everybody, especially if you're an American, in everyone has a level of stress. Everyone has a level of PTSD. I believe PTSD is a spectrum.
Right.
It's not one of those. It's either you have it or you don't. Because you look at the way this culture works, or just human culture works in general, especially here in America. We play mind games on each other all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and some of these mind games, they hurt. They hurt really bad,
Mm-hmm.
and they cause us a lot of grief, and they cause us a lot of fear.
Especially in developmental stages, when you're a child and you're not being reared up the way nature was intended. Like I see a lot of parents out like the way they talk to their little kids, like makes me just want to come up and slap them. Is just like this passive aggressive like bullshit. Like, what are you doing to your kid, man?
Yeah, plain man. Some of them even pit their kids against each other.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, sure, there's nothing wrong with competition, obviously, but you could see. I mean, we've all grown up around other families who just evolved into just either they really love each other or they all hate each other.
Yeah.
And all the ones that hate each other, you see how the parents just pit their kids against each other for that attention, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
The drama is so high because the stakes are so low. It becomes like that. It's so odd. And so anyway, I see a lot of these people, and you're just wondering, okay, what do I do here?
Mm-hmm.
Like my very first anxiety patient, when after I opened up my acupuncture practice, I thought I had this. I was a big hot shot. I was like, yeah, fresh out of college, and wanting to specialize in Shen disorder. I get this anxiety patient that comes in, and I lay her down, and the moment I stick the first needle in, that was it. She was having a panic attack.
Oh.
And I had no idea what to do, but thankfully, I was able to lead her through breathing exercises and stabilizing her and all this stuff, and decided to, okay.
Did you leave the needle in?
No. I took them all out. We ended the treatment right there. The treatment lasted like 5 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
But I begged her. I was like, I asked her, hey, please, give me another chance.
Mm-hmm.
Come back next week. I'll have something for you, and she came back, and I had a different setup this time. This time I used one of those reflexology chairs, like a kind of like a lawn chair type thing,
Mm-hmm.
um, which reclines. I had, and we're just doing um, like auricular acupuncture. And instead of like soothing music, I had her listening to Alan Watts,
Uh-huh.
you know,
Well,
and
auricular? I'm not familiar with that term.
oh, auricular acupuncture is just ear acupuncture.
Oh, ear. Okay, gotcha.
And
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 listening to Alan Watts.
yeah, and listening to Alan Watts and stuff, but slowly and surely, I was able to get her stabilized enough, get her shen stabilized enough so that I can actually do real body acupuncture, and I
Mm-hmm.
have,
Mm-hmm.
and this was back in 2013 when I first started. It was like my rookie season. It's my rookie year as an acupuncturist, and it was around that time. I'd been away from Michael's stuff for some time, uh, mainly because of school. After school, I joined the military,
Mm-hmm.
joined the reserve. And then after I got back home from training, and that's when I opened up my stuff. So, and of course that ate up a lot of money. So again, I couldn't make it to Michael's workshops.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, I was still active, talking to Michael. What do I do in these situations and things like that? And he would basically tell me, "Well, you better sit. You better do your sittings. You better
Mm-hmm.
do your gift of Tao." At the time, he only had gift of the Tao one out, I want to say. No, actually, he had gift of the Tao two out.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting because when I first made it to Michael's workshop in 2010, he was just introducing gift of the Tao two.
Mm-hmm.
Um, from what I remember, it was a bit different from what we have now as gift of the Tao two.
Oh, really? It's evolved
Yeah.
since then?
Yeah, it's evolved.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time he released the DVD, that's the real gift of the Tao too.
Yeah.
But
You got the prototype version?
yeah, I got the beta version. Yeah, it was really interesting. It was really interesting,
Mhm.
and it was I want to say that was the first time that any of us experienced that. It was actually the weekend that Joan Glenn got certified.
Mm-hmm.
And so she taught us Gift of the Tao 1, and then that's when Michael said, "Okay, I got a surprise for you. I got Gift of the Tao 2."
Mm.
And one thing I do remember was doing the Spirit Circle Walk.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it's called?
I think so.
Yeah, the Spirit Circle Walk.
Yeah.
Where Michael, I want to say, if I remember correctly, Michael stayed in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
and all of us walked around, and it created an amazing vortex that you just couldn't explain. I was a newbie at the time, so was Sean,
Mm-hmm.
but we knew exactly what's going on. And we knew exactly what's going on because Michael had, by that time we had already gone through ceremony and Michael had opened us up. And so, yeah, it's quite the experience there.
So, going back to Michael telling you to just practice the sitting, I got to hang out with Nisa this week.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You're one of your kind of a protege. She said you kind of like did a lot to kind of encourage her to, and I think got her into Gift of the Tao and all that. And so me and her were trying to discuss which one of us is the laziest is the laziest practitioner. So she told me that you're a beast, that you just you do sittings like in between, before, like 2 hours before your patients come in, like in between patients, just kind of constantly. She said Sonny's just all about like efficiency.
Yeah. Well, see, here's the main thing, and I wanted to get to this part. Now, I'm sorry that our listeners had to kind of wade through all that. stuff. But that was the main thing that I saw as an acupuncture student with with Michael's work with stillness movement Qigong is efficiency
Mm-hmm.
on all levels.
Mm-hmm.
In acupuncture, you get through all these, you get through the program, you get to learn the theory. Learning a theory is a good thing. I think it's a must-learn thing.
Mm-hmm.
Learning the acupuncture points, learning what the organs do, learning the channels, what they do, what they're indicated in, both physically and spiritually. Um, Learning how to deal with them. What do I do here? Learning diagnosis. All those things are very important, as far as I'm concerned. And Michael, even though he doesn't really talk to them, he knows them.
Yeah.
They're embedded in his energy body, and he just deals with them.
Mm-hmm.
And he gives it to people piece by piece,
Mm-hmm.
because the weekends aren't long enough to go through all this theory.
Right, right.
But he does give it to us piece by piece. Um, but when you're just dealing with acupuncture alone, and this was my whole rookie season. I wasn't doing any sort of chi projection because I didn't feel I was ready to, because I didn't have a fully developed Dantian yet.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know Angela?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Well, my friend Angela, who used to be, in a program to, she was one of Michael's students.
Mm-hmm.
She had passed away already.
Right.
But she used to, sit there and tell me how god awful my Dantian looked to her.
Just looks like a bunch of like chewing gum.
Yeah, it was just like mucky and just weak. And she would just so I'd ask her, "How's my Dantian?" And she looked at me and she goes, "Womp womp," It was awful, and so I was like, all right. So I took her advice, I took Michael's advice. I'm going to sit until I got well-developed Dantian.
Mm-hmm.
And because Michael formed it for us, that's what he does.
Mm-hmm.
He creates it for us, and it's up to us to develop it. And so the efficiency here, as far as acupuncture is concerned, is that once the Dantian is developed and your vibration is raised, whatever you touch with the intent of healing activates the acupuncture point or channel much more so than the needle itself.
So at this point, when you do your regular acupuncture practice, is it almost kind of like the acupuncture is just kind of the carrier wave for the chi projection? Like you don't have to explain this stuff to people. They just come in for acupuncture and you kind of do your thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny because I have either the patient that needs to know what is going on, and so I would just tell them in just the most mundane, everyday way, is that you have roughly 360 points on your body, which act at sort of like computer reset points for each organ system, or for a local problem such as knee. And you stimulate these points, and it incites a healing response from the point up to, through the fascia, up to the central nervous system, back down to where the healing needs to be. And that's it. Otherwise, if they don't ask me, I'm just doing my thing. So my own personal mechanics is that I activate the points with my intent before I needle them.
Right.
And as I'm carrying the needle, I am juicing up the needle. And as soon as the needle is inserted, the contact of my fingers with the needle and the needle with the patient, I'm commanding the stagnation of the channel or acupuncture point to dissolve, and to push chi through. I'm basically pushing chi.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially what I'm doing with acupuncture and qigong. And I found it much more efficient to do it that way than just using the needle itself. Without manipulating the chi and removing the chi with acupuncture, you're just kind of like, it's kind of like receiving a massage. It feels good, you feel better, but you still have those toxins in you. So it's up to you to drink the water so that you pee all out, all those toxins. But it's not always true that that happens the way we want. But with acupuncture mixed with chi projection and stagnant chi removal, yes, you're improving circulation of the channels, but you're also removing that which is blocked. Right?
Do you believe this approach to have been the original way that acupuncture was practiced in the first place? That's how it was developed, and it kind of degraded over time into just sticking needles into people a little bit willy-nilly?
It's interesting because I've been trying to find something about this, but I simply can't, because everything, number one, is in Chinese.
Right.
And we're limited to what translators want to translate.
And then a ton of materials were burned. And I forget, if a few hundred years ago, there was this one crazy emperor that just decided to eradicate every Taoist text that he could get his hands on. Yeah, everything like that. Yeah, who is it? Emperor Qin, the one who unified? I don't know. But maybe.
But but this is just my own opinion on matter, and my opinion alone. People might think I'm an idiot for this, but this is just the way I think. I think that in order to be aware that we have acupuncture points and channels, someone had to have felt them and found them.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's only somebody that is keenly aware of the energies of nature that can actually find them. We're talking about, the people that predated so-called Taoism are the shaman.
Right.
They're the ones who could see everything because they spend all their time with nature, and so they would find these channels, they would find these acupuncture points, and they would do the trial and error things, and cause and effect to develop an entire system. And so that's why I want to believe that, our first and foremost book on internal medicine, or TCM, is the Yellow Emperor's Guide to Internal Medicine, the Huangdi Neijing. And I'm led to believe, just using my own logic alone, that in order to write a book that extensive, that is still used today.
What is it, 3,000 years later?
It was allegedly written in 200 BC. So we're talking about 2,200 years. In order to write a book that extensive, the theory must have been there,
right,
for at least a couple thousand years, and refined, so that the legendary Yellow Emperor and his and Chibo would be able to have that discourse that was to be written down, and which is the Huangdi Neijing. And so again, in my opinion, acupuncture was created because not everybody can simply see and project chi.
Right.
So they had to systemize it so that you can use, your fingers, bones, or needles, or whatnot, stones, to get everything going. And that's just my own opinion, based on, the history that I learned.
And it's almost like when you're inserting a needle into a point because you believe that that's point control something. That's kind of what creates the intent right there.
Yeah.
Even if you're not specifically cultivating intent, that's kind of what's creating it.
Yeah, it's it's really interesting reading a lot of these these studies. I mean, there are those studies where they, someone comes in for like headache, right? They do real acupuncture. Oh, it works for headaches. They do sham acupuncture where they're using any other point, just like willy-nilly, and it still works, even though they're treating headaches.
Mm-hmm.
When they say that they're treating headaches, that's their intent.
Right.
Their intent is treating headaches. So wherever you tend to place your, and essentially they're doing Qigong,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so where does this take us? What do we do? And so that, again, that leads me back into the efficiency. When we're talking about efficiency,
mm-hmm.
is you build your vibration high enough so that intent is strong enough. So the acupuncture point and the treatment starts working even before you place the needle.
Mm-hmm.
So, say there's an acupuncture point in between your first and second metacarpal, your thumb and your finger, forefinger.
Mm-hmm.
Right there is called Li4 Hagu. And
that's a popular one.
Yeah, that's a popular one. It's a strong point for circulating qi in the upper body.
Mm-hmm.
It gets rid of headaches, helps with toothaches and such. I have had patients that before I even place the needle even near that point, they would feel it right away. They start wincing because they know it's a pretty tender point. And so,
and at that point, you're just sticking needles into them for your own fun.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a prop,
Yeah.
And here's the interesting part. The more I started sitting, the more my patients couldn't handle which gauge needles that I used. I used to use 30 by 0.30, 0.30 gauge, which is pretty thick.
Mm-hmm.
But people were able to take them. But the more I started doing the sittings, the more I started doing the movements, the higher the vibration is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's being channeled through the needle.
Mm-hmm.
And so the same person that could handle 30/30s couldn't handle them anymore. So I started using 0.25s.
Mm-hmm. And
then I finally came back to Michael's workshops, about 3 years ago. And after that first workshop, I couldn't use the 0.25s anymore. My patients started screaming at me like, what the hell are you doing?
Like as you're inserting it hurts, or while it's sitting in there, it starts bothering them, or both?
Both. Yeah, both. Yeah. They can't handle it anymore.
Mm.
And so and so right now I'm down to using 0.16s and 0.12s.
Oh, wow.
That's as low as I could go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's like hair,
mm-hmm.
pretty much. And so, some of them could barely handle that, but, I can't. But the efficiency there is that, I don't have to project qi the entire time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, I do have
it's like
patients.
A set it and forget it system.
Yeah, kind of. So with your patient, say that that wants the acupuncture. Of course, I'm doing qigong as I'm doing the acupuncture, inserting needles and placing that intent You know,
Mhm.
I do a little bit of work. You know, I remove the chi, and I allow for the recirculation of chi. You know, but I do get the patients that don't want the needles. They don't want acupuncture, and so I am projecting the entire time.
Mhm.
But you know, combined with the acupuncture, it's kind of like the set it and forget it thing. You know, acupuncture does work without the qigong.
Mhm.
It really does.
Yeah.
Uh, but it doesn't work as fast.
Mhm.
You know, and so I found my treatment outcomes to be much faster.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's also my experience, or at least my impression, that acupuncture is kind of meant to be more of a preemptive therapy. Like if you wait for things to fall apart and then start treating it, it's much harder, and you don't always get very good results.
Yeah. It's interesting, but because yes, it is preventive medicine.
Because a lot of it is based about on rebalancing the different energies in your body. So that's something that you want to do as a maintenance routine, rather than trying to just deal with emergencies as they arise.
Right.
Because then it's that much harder.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. But unfortunately, because we are alternative medicine, we tend to be in this interesting sort of situation where we're somebody's last hope.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I get these calls and emails all the time. Everything else hasn't worked, and so you're in the situation where you're either going to be the person that saves,
mm-hmm.
or or their last stop before they go to surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And most of the time, most of the time, I'm able to save them from the surgery.
That's awesome.
And this is using both clinical qigong and acupuncture.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're talking about something like severely structural, like if someone is severely overweight,
right,
and they have knee pain,
mm-hmm.
it's not a matter of what I can do.
Right.
Okay? I could treat anything. I just can't treat karma. You know what I mean? I can't stop you from putting that Big Mac in your mouth.
Dude, that's how you start balling. If you can chi project people into weight loss with no diet or exercise.
That's it. I've been rolling in dough.
Oh, you'll be running the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a couple of needles, maybe some zapping.
I'm telling you. Exactly.
But yeah, and that's an important point. There's a lot of situations where even if you have a bent towards alternative medicine, you kind of have to make some real world decisions of when that's appropriate and when you have to go with just some kind of mainstream intervention, especially like you said, if it's just some kind of strictly structural physiological thing that just needs to be fixed. And that could be difficult sometimes, especially if you don't have a lot of time to play around with different therapies.
Right, exactly. I mean, there's all the what I call, I don't know, I wouldn't want to say failures, but of the people that I couldn't help,
mm-hmm.
It has been physical stuff. Physical as far as not physical, I'm sorry. They have been structural things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one of them had herniation in their cervical spine.
Mm-hmm.
The herniation was going forward towards the throat.
Ooh.
I mean, there's really nothing I could do about that.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that acupuncture did for them, and Taoist medicine techniques, was give them a little bit more time that is free of discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
They tried everything else, and within an hour, they would feel the pain again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what clinical qigong and acupuncture did was provide them with just a couple more hours of relief. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, though it's structural. It's not something that I could do.
Right.
And again, with the weight loss, being severely overweight and having knee pain or, lower joint pain, I mean, I can't do anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's all physics. I can't,
Right.
But, that being said, there are some things that we just can't treat. Michael and I were just discussing that, because sometimes it's simply just not our call.
Right.
There's a lesson there, or there's a karmic thing involved, or whatnot, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. Or if there is any room for improvement or for change, that kind of has to come from you. It has to come from a decision to change it.
Yeah. I mean, there was one patient that came in, prospective patient that came in, and this is another example manifested, where the patient simply just didn't know what they want. And
it's like you always have all these like dope T-shirts. I remember you came to a workshop with one that cracked me up that said everything hurts and I'm dying. So
yeah.
It sounds like that was kind of like the patient's mindset.
Yeah, it was one of the yeah. I mean, I love irony. I'm a hipster in that respect.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was one patient that she simply didn't know what she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And here's an interesting insight. And I learned this much later. Needless to say, that patient was very unhappy with the treatment that I gave her, and I gave her a refund, and that was it. Never saw her again. But an interesting insight I learned much later is that there are patients that really don't want to get better. They they want to attach themselves to their pain and identify with it because it gives them some sort of purpose or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
They say they want to on the surface, but they really don't.
Yeah.
And when you ask them the question, do you want to get better? If there is any sort of pause,
Mm-hmm.
they really don't.
Mm-hmm.
They really don't.
Mm.
And so, as a practitioner, what do? You just kind of humor them. It's like, okay, we'll just do some stuff.
You just practice refund Qigong.
Yeah, refund Qigong, because essentially, you can treat them. You can have them coming over all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to get better. Okay. And so you're faced with this decision of having to let them go or refer them elsewhere. I normally refer people elsewhere if I can't help them.
So is this something you use as a screening process when you talk to them in the first place? You ask them this and kind of gauge their reaction? Or does it just kind of come up spontaneously sometimes?
You can kind of tell.
Mm.
Yeah, you can kind of tell. My screening process is that because I can't answer the phone, because I'm always treating somebody, and I get horrendous, signal in my office,
Mm-hmm.
is that I've actually, you either have to text me or email me.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if people are willing to do so, then that's fine, because, there's people that just would rather talk on a phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though all my information's there, but that's just another discussion here. But really, yeah, you might need to cut that one out.
So you're able to tell sometimes just from an email or from a text, like by their language, if they're actually seeking help or they just want to kind of perpetuate the drama and get the attention.
Yeah, sometimes I can tell what, in general, I can tell what sort of patient they're going to be
Mm-hmm.
like. Um, I'm looking for, because, you know, and this is from my own practice management. Okay. I don't charge a whole lot because the neighborhood that I work in, or that I station myself in, isn't the fanciest neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
where I could charge $100 something per treatment.
Right.
Okay. And so, my prices tend to be a little on the lower side,
Mm-hmm.
and if I have patients that are asking me for, right away, for, like, certain discounts or things like that, and, for a lot of time that I don't have,
Mm-hmm.
for things that are not necessarily pertinent to their own healing,
Mm-hmm.
and they're basically, what you can tell, what Michael warns us about energy vampires.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's people that just simply won't be satisfied with what you give them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and yes, you can tell from time to time
Yeah.
through text or email.
Yeah. Those are pretty easy to pick up on if you know what to look for.
Yeah. And so, that's a huge lesson in practice management, is that, you can have all the compassion in the world, but you
Yeah.
can't afford to be dumb.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's why one of the things that Michael teaches in the chi production, actually the final step, is to kind of separate yourself from the patient. You've done your best. You did the best job that you could. You did your job. Move on. You don't spend a lot of time worrying about them, and
Yeah.
you just let it. Let the feedback come to you, but don't kind of engage that. Kind of know where to separate yourself from each particular patient. That's important.
Yeah, exactly. It is super, super important, and, if you have an attitude like that, then you have a natural barrier between you and your patient,
Yeah.
which is, manifested physically as the golden and purple bubble.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, patients will appreciate that. Because patients really need that sort of barrier. Like it's good to tell them, and it's true. You're with them on this journey towards their own healing,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel for them, and you want to do your help for them, but you can't do it all for them, And so, we're just like any other really true spiritual practice, where that we're here to point you in the right direction.
Right.
I'm here to physically or spiritually point your body, your spirit body, or your energy body, or your physical body in the right direction. I can't do it all for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially, yeah, there is, to some degree, a preventive medicine aspect to that as well, that we are promoting, because we are letting them know that they are in charge. We are empowering them with their own health. That's what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't do it all for them. And that being said, that's why we can't sit there and dwell on whether or not we help them.
Right. Especially since a lot of problems that people are dealing with are a result of just modern lifestyle and poor choices, and a lot of times it's just that's the environment you live in. It's really, really hard to make proper healthy choices with lifestyle all the time, just because the whole environment you're immersed with is full of unnatural things that kind of kick you out of a balanced state.
Absolutely.
But but because there's so much of it, there's absolutely, like, you can't just, stick a needle in someone and that'll magically make them go to sleep at a good time and drink
Right.
lots of water and go for
Right.
walks and all of that. So there definitely needs to be, like you said, like a reorientation. Like if you can nudge
Yeah.
them in a certain direction and they can tell the differential between that's how I was feeling before and this is how I'm feeling now, and I want to build on this. That's how people will get better.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are times when, you can actually give them a huge nudge
Mm-hmm.
in the right direction. And, with the acupuncture and or the energy medicine, you'll wake them up,
Mm-hmm.
wake up their spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And, take for instance, I had one patient who was going through, again, I specialize in Shen disorder. So I had one patient who was going through bipolar disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And, I pop the needles in and I do an energy treatment. This time I did a distance treatment. I wasn't with them in the room. I decided to go into the other room and do a distance treatment. So I sat in stillness meditation and did everything with my spirit. And, I removed some stagnant chi. I talked to various aspects of her body. Everything is spirit, right? Everything in the body contains spirit. So sometimes there are aspects of the body that are severely unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of sit there with them like a friend. You're not projecting, you're not doing anything else. You're just kind of sitting there with them, and you're asking permission, hey, can I sit with you?
Mm.
And they say, yeah, sure. And then sometimes you'll see an aspect of the actual patient somewhere in the ether.
Mm.
And and Michael has taught us these techniques, and they're very similar to the shamanic idea of what is that called?
Spirit retrieval,
soul
soul
retrieval.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And they appear, and it's really interesting. They appear in the current clothing. and so if my patient is wearing like a black T-shirt, say like a Black Ramones T-shirt, say, you'll see like a little boy or a little girl in a Black Ramones T-shirt. And you ask, hey, are you such and such? And they'll always say yes.
Do you want to be sedated?
Yeah. Do you want to be sedated? Want to go rock and roll high school?
Are you trying to give me a hint right now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. and so I say, hey, let's go. I'm sorry.
I think that's all our Ramones puns at this point.
Yeah,
We've used them up.
It's done. It's done. Oh boy. So anyway, and so I asked them, hey, do you want to come back? And they will always say yes, because I will say they need you. And so, I blow back that energy into their heart and into their Bai Hui Du 20 at the crown.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I performed that one. But with this particular patient, I did that on top of harmonizing and speaking to the spirits of their organs. And I, after the treatment, I removed the needles, and it turned the patient around. I got her off her meds. Okay. And that was just an amazing thing. Her sister told me, like, I don't know what you did, but she is, the person that she was before this one trauma, and I said, hey, it's spirit. I'm just an empty vessel, and, but going back to what you're saying, is that, because of the lifestyle, it's hard, to maintain that sort of level of health, you know, um, because of certain stimuli surrounding her, particular reality, her everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
She experienced, a massive relapse.
Mm.
After I got her off her meds, after I got her to actually see the light, to experience that inner peace,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, so that's why, whether it's either chronic pain, acute pain, or emotional pain, I treat it as a sort of sports medicine. Because in sports medicine, what do? You got your athlete out there, banging away, whether playing football or hockey, whatnot, destroying themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and they come back to you. I'm in pain. Like, well, yeah, of course you're in pain. You just, you're just destroying your body out there.
Yeah.
And so you do what you can, and then they go out and do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, yeah, like all that stimuli, that's out of their control. It's completely out of their control.
Mm-hmm. And then whatever your body or your psyche, however it chooses to deal with this trauma and take you into these bad paths, like that becomes a habituation. It's very, very hard to break. And if it's something you've been doing for 20, 30 years, and even if you kind of got a little bit of light, like a trigger can send you back right into, because it's such a well-worn groove.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard.
It is really tough, but this is why we're here too, is to show them that there is another way, and that's why, when Michael told us that our Qigong lineage is a synthesis of Taoism and Buddhism and shamanism.
Mm-hmm.
I decided, I did have rudimentary knowledge of Taoism and Buddhism in general.
Mm-hmm.
However, I decided to dig in much deeper into what Taoism and Buddhism really, really is, energetically and philosophically.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that these philosophies are very, very healing. And they helped turn my life around.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I want to dare to say that, if you're a healer, especially an energy healer, you have to understand these philosophies.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is where our medicine comes from.
Mm.
What is the Buddha really saying to us? What is Lao Tzu really saying to us? And so as I got deeper into these philosophies, I realized that I can actually shell out some advice if my patients really want them.
Sorry, are you successful sometimes? Do you try to direct people towards some kind of a practice that they can maintain on their own outside of you treating them?
Yes, only if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have been studying, Taoist and Zen philosophy for quite some time now. And I do believe that these things can be life-changing. They can help you reevaluate your relationship to all these stresses, all these stimulations,
Mm-hmm.
All these stimuli that make us negative or feel negative,
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, because that's what this is. This is spiritual practice. And so if they want it, then, I kind of throw it out there that I can help them, but only if they want it. And when they do say, like, yeah, how do I get there? How can I drive without feeling angry?
Mm.
feeling that sort of indignation for crazy drivers. How do I drive? And so I'd show them, but I'd always also remind them that this is a life practice.
Mm-hmm.
Doing mindfulness work, whether it's Qigong or just, Vipassana, meditation, Zazen, whatever you want to call it. These are life work. This is a lifetime endeavor,
Mm-hmm.
And so I remind them of that, and that opens up this channel of forgiveness within them if ever they, revert back to being angry at, being called a panty waste or whatever, and so that's where that whole thing is that, I get you. You come to Purple Cloud and you're with me for an hour or 2 hours, and I'm getting you to this state, this state of peace. And you walk back outside, you're in the middle of Rogers Park on Clark Street, one of the more hopping neighborhoods, up and coming neighborhoods in Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
And it's very stimulating. And there are a lot of people out there that carry a lot of, of stress with them.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with that? After I stabilized you. And so that's why I give them these exercises only if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
These philosophical exercises, I teach them Qigong. I teach my own patients, stillness movement and gift of the Tao, because it's very important.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important. It's important to me as giving, as a nutritionist giving nutritional advice.
Right.
Because you're addressing the entirety of the person.
So because you specifically deal with Shen disorders, going back to my previous point, kind of a lot of times you have some kind of a mental imbalance, mental issue. The hardest thing is for you to realize that you do.
Mm-hmm.
How does that come up? Do you ever have someone that just wants you to work on a relative of theirs, where it's like a distance thing? Do you always have to have the person asking you for help and have their consent, or do you sometimes can just kind of do it on someone at the request of someone else?
Yes, absolutely. It has to be completely consensual and voluntary. The one time that it wasn't, it was almost a bad day, because I had a parent try to bring in their son. Their son is in their mid-20s,
Mm-hmm.
And has severe depression and anxiety, and almost violent tantrums. And the parent signed them up for treatment. And I took the treatment, assuming that, the kid wanted to come, or the young man wanted to come. And, the doorbell rang. It was the dad. It was the father, who was, already one of my patients. And he said that, my son is in the car. He didn't want the treatment. He said that if he saw me, he probably would do something bad to me,
Mm-hmm.
So, be very violent. And I said, okay, well, let's treat you instead, because, you're going to be the one driving him home, And so, I gave him a treatment. It was a, wonderful treatment. And, and this is interesting because I don't mean to go off on this tangent here, but after I gave him the treatment, he had enough inner peace with him to exude that inner peace to his son,
Mm-hmm.
on the ride home,
Mm-hmm.
to a point to where the son, during the treatment, his son was banging on the door, was honking the horn outside
Mm-hmm.
of the building, and, raising a ruckus out there. And I was like, oh my God, he's going to do something bad,
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately he didn't. And so what happened is after the treatment, I got his father to that state of peace that that he exuded peace.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to the point to where the son actually picked up that vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And the son then calmed down and actually apologized. So, I didn't mean to go off on this tangent here, but
No worries.
this is the power of what clinical Qigong can do.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I mean, people definitely pick up on each other's energies, even if you're not realizing that's what happened. That's what's happening. I mean, if that's how, riots, things in crowds, that's how they seem to like propagate very quickly, as this kind of like escalating thing, and the opposite too. If there's someone has like a very like calm or confident, like strong vibe about them that projects to you, people tend to perceive you in a certain way, and it affects their state.
Yes, absolutely. Because we're all interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
So in your immediate environment, you're going to pick up on that, on that vibe. If it's a positive vibe, roll with it. If it's a negative vibe, then you might have to do a little something.
Yeah.
Either, you listen to spirit. If spirit, sometimes spirit will tell you, okay, well, do something here, or spirit will say, you better go out and run.
Yeah.
In that case, you listen to what spirit has to say, what that little birdie on your shoulder is telling you. But yeah, you absolutely have to have consent. We can only treat people who raise their hands and want to be helped. And that's the whole part. But there are times, and this happens more often than not. And this is very, very rudimentary stuff. There is a comorbidity to chronic pain and stress, anxiety, or emotional distress. Those two go together. You go through any pain, you're going to be, your emotions are going to get involved. If your emotions are involved first, then you're going to start experiencing pain. It manifests in both ways. That being said, I get a lot of patients who think they're coming in for just pain, or rather they say they're coming in just because they have stiff neck or stiff shoulders or back. All right. You learn after a while that these things don't occur without any sort of stress. And so you give them that treatment. But then, they're sleeping on the table. And, you get up and they say they feel wonderful after the treatment, and you help them tremendously. But what you also did there was you're also addressing their shen. You're also calming them. That's essentially what is relieving their pain. Because, more often than not, it's, that pain is going to accompany the stress, and vice versa. So, yeah, they in that case, like, yeah, they're not necessarily they are raising their hand, but not necessarily raising their hand explicitly for emotional distress, But yeah, it's been quite it's been quite an evolution, and again, going back to the efficiency of it, you could see things faster. You could diagnose it, energetically diagnose faster. Once your vibration's been raised. And that's why I have a very military-like regimen. One of my day is, like, especially on work days, weekdays, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. By 5:30, I had my tea. and I do my Qigong movements,
Mm-hmm.
do my Qigong movements, and I do what I call exercise Qigong if I can't do running Qigong, with my awareness and, being a Qi state and my awareness and my Dantian as I'm lifting weights, and that includes the 5-element weighted exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like hour and a half. I get my kids ready for school, get my boy ready, get my girl ready, drop her off. After I drop her off, I make it to the office by, I want to say, 9:30. So that gives me another hour and a half before my first patient at 11 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I can't, get all that Qigong time in. And so whenever we're doing acupuncture, I'll have about 15, 20 minutes to do some sittings.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff like that. So
while the patient is just hanging out with needles in them, you're doing sitting.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Doing sitting or whatnot. Sitting is my main practice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just drawn to the sitting. It's done amazing work for me. Standing too, to a certain extent, but definitely the sitting. Hell, I mean, Michael didn't have Gift of the Tao when he was, learning this stuff. I mean, he was sitting,
Right.
and so he was sitting and treating. That's how I think that's how he was trained, right?
Mm-hmm.
He just trained by doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, my regimen is very strict. I'm very, very strict, and I'm very strict with Nisa. Yeah. She's probably told you I'm just like on her case all the time.
Yeah.
And she's like, what are you doing? But I found Nisa because she is incredibly gifted.
Yeah, she's got a lot of really just natural ability and great instincts.
Yeah, great instincts, and she cares.
Mm-hmm.
She really does.
Yeah.
And I first felt her chi when she was giving me an acupuncture treatment.
Oh, she told me that story.
Yeah. I mean, and the story goes like, she gave me acupuncture and she, and I felt some tingles. And I was like, well, what are you doing? I knew exactly what she was doing. I just want to know she knew what she was doing. And she was, she's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, no, what are you doing? Tell me what you're doing. She's like, I am, she finally said, I'm projecting white chi,
mm-hmm.
White light onto your body. I was like, that's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
All right. And so I introduced her to Michael's system, and and I'm blessed enough to be able to have found a lot of talent out there,
Mm-hmm.
Some of whom I was, able to convince to go to Michael's stuff. Kelly already had her influence. I helped influence Allison. I mean, Allison's completely gifted. I mean, there's not enough I could say about, how gifted, all of these women are
Mm-hmm.
that I've found. And I feel like that, they're just popping up. I'm in this really unique position where I can actually find talent and recruit talent. Some of whom are, my own patients.
Right.
And so it's, and this is what I want, and that talent is that, a lot of people just have that innate thing about them.
Mm-hmm.
And you could tell, when I do clinical Qigong or introduce clinical Qigong to a patient who's never experienced anything like this before, I ask them to relax. They lay down on a treatment table, and I project Qi on, the bottom of the foot, Yong Chuan, Kidney 1, bubbling spring. They don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like,
what am I paying you for?
Yeah. Yeah, they're just like, and I tell them, I'm just doing a sensitivity test. I'm not going to touch you, but you may or may not feel any sensations, right?
Interesting.
And so what I do is I project chi into the bottom of the foot, and more often than not, they're gonna ask me if I'm rubbing, physically rubbing the bottom of their foot, or sometimes they'll feel a tingle going up their leg, or they're gonna feel it on the opposite foot, you know. And I tell them to open up their eyes and look at what I'm doing, and they'll notice that my fingers are, quite far from their body. And depending on the person, and you could gauge what kind of person they are, depending on the person, I will say, you may be a natural healer. We should do something about this. Especially if they're at some sort of crossroads,
right
in their career, and they don't, they're not exactly sure. And I've encountered one that I was fortunate enough to catch, per se. They're at a crossroads, and they wasn't sure what they would, but they were told by other people that they were meant to be a healer, and so I did that test on them, on her, and. Long story being short, she is now in, shiatsu school and learning energy healing, and is one of my students.
That's awesome.
For clinical qigong. That helps us with our mission to bring much more positivity into this current realm that we're experiencing right now. Very important stuff.
Yeah. So you kind of you find that the people that are sensitive to this sort of energy it's because they kind of have a natural affinity. Like most people, consciously, I assume, don't.
Yeah, I think all of us have it within us.
Yeah. It's just depending on how closed off or open you are.
Yeah, and how many filters we have. Towards. That what I call the complete reality, and how open they are to it energetically. And so if they can feel and sense the energy, they have that sort of thing in them that may, make them or help them become a great healer, potentially. Potentially. And they don't even have to join our path. They can, be, say, a therapist, counselor, or a nurse or whatnot.
Yeah, just someone that can provide that extra layer of mojo besides just the the regular worldly thing that you do. Right,
exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, having a practice has been a blessing. I'm glad I listened because, before all of this, before I decided to do acupuncture, I was I was miserable. Yeah, I was completely miserable. I was experiencing severe depression, severe anxiety, and like anger you would not, believe. Like Sith anger, that kind of anger, and it's funny because, like, I mean, I got into Eastern practice like back in 1995. I was a young college kid, and I was watching National Geographic, and they're showing a Shaolin, like a little special on a Shaolin, kung fu, martial arts, and it's cool. I really enjoyed the dance-like movements of the forms, like the monkey form and the tiger form and dragon, and very powerful stuff. But what really fascinated me and captivated me was the fact that their martial practice was rooted in Chan Buddhism and meditation, and so that actually drove me to find a school. And fortunately, I found one. Found a school that, and sure enough, they taught me meditation and really rudimentary introductory Buddhism and stuff, and that's where I learned my first Qigong. It was like iron shirt, martial Qigong.
Mm-hmm.
And I practiced it for a number of years, but you know, after I graduated college and I joined that whole like corporate workforce, I was an undergrad for hotel administration.
Mm-hmm.
I went to UNLV in Las Vegas. I did that whole game.
Mm-hmm.
Play the corporate game, look real good, earn the money, buy the cars, get the watch,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But I was just miserable. I was like, why am I so unhappy?
Mm-hmm.
I moved back home to Chicago. I take over a family business in real estate and income tax, even more so.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, now I was angry and pissed off all the time,
Mm-hmm.
to the point to where I just didn't want to be a part of this world anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I was at home and it occurred to me, maybe I should go back to meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So I Googled Chicago Zen Temple. And the first thing that pops up was Chicago Zen Shiatsu. Shiatsu is the Japanese body work.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, hey, this looks cool. I like massage, And so I went and I found out that it was a school. I got the treatment, fell in love with it. And it felt like, my wife's pregnant. Maybe she'll benefit from this. And I ended up in class, like their introductory free class.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment I laid my hands on the training partner of my classmate, that's when it all clicked. I was like, oh, I think this is it.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the alchemy I was waiting for.
Mm-hmm. So you would you say that kind of like the anger and the dissatisfaction and depression was mostly stemming from the fact that you were just not like some part of you knew you had a calling and that you were just going in a completely different direction, and that's what was kind of triggering that response?
Yeah, I mean,
and I guess also not having the tools to deal with that stress and the anger if you don't have a meditation. It becomes like a feedback loop.
Yeah. I mean, that was part of it. Part of what I was doing for a living, a lot of it was arguing.
Yeah.
I was either arguing with tenants or property, like the city, or I was arguing with the IRS.
Yeah, that's right.
And there were times when I felt bullied.
Uh-huh.
And I was bullied a lot when I was a kid, racially and whatnot, and just whatever. And I carried a lot of anger from that as well. And so that, the work that I was doing was really bringing all that stuff up to surface,
right,
up to the surface, and just, would turn into like full blown just breakdowns, and but at the same time, exactly what you're saying, that I wasn't fulfilling a particular purpose, because I was playing the game, right? You're part of the matrix, and you're just like, and the matrix tells you, you have to earn the money, you have to seek fame, seek importance, and seek the money, seek blah, 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 pretty much everything we do on Facebook nowadays. Seek that, that external validation. That's what we're doing. That we're told that must be done. And if you don't do it, then your life is going to be horrendous. We buy into it. We plug into that. And 100% of me was unhappy with that. And that's why I was depressed. Like, why am I depressed? I didn't realize it at the time, but it was that. And so when I finally laid my hands, to practice on my practice partner, it just all made sense. And so, one decision was made after another, and now I have this practice. I practice in the very same space. I took over that building. It was a family building. We took it over. I took it over as the clinic. And when I was trying to find where should I put this treatment bed, And I was walking around and I felt like a little bit of denseness in the area where my desk used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I put the treatment bed,
Mm-hmm.
is so that I could transform that negativity
Ah,
into that positive healing energy.
interesting.
So every single day that I walk into that particular area and I'm treating my patient, I'm constantly reminded of
Mhm.
what my
Mhm.
life used to be.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, I
That's
mean, there are times when I was thinking of ending it all, and I'll sit there at my desk wondering how should I do it in the least messy way, you know, and so these memories would pop up, as I'm doing these treatments, and I'm reminded of the compassion uh, that I finally made for myself, and I can channel that compassion into my patients, you know, and that's the reason why I put that treatment, uh, the treatment bed there, and
Mhm.
that's the reason why I focus on Shen,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
and because I know what it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I've been in that hole, and I could actually jump into that hole and say, hey, I could lead you out of here
Mhm.
because
And
I've been there myself.
and that's
Yeah,
really the classic shamanic journey, really.
yeah, it sure is, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. You're kind of
Yeah.
you're kind of textbook.
Yeah, kind of textbook in that matter. Yeah, and it was odd because like when I was 7 years old, I remember this Thursday. I was 7 years old. I was sitting in class, teachers talking, surrounded by all these kids, and I was thrust into this other dimension. I don't know what dimension it was, but it basically told me or brought the question, why am I here? Why am I sitting at this desk being talked at?
Mhm.
Why do I feel like I'm in prison?
Mhm.
Why is she doing this? Why are all these kids doing this? And that stuck with me for the longest time until 1999 when this movie came out that explained everything to me, what I was feeling, and it was The
The
Matrix.
Matrix. Yeah,
You
that,
know?
that that movie warped my brain as well in
Yeah,
99. I guess we're about the same age. I take
I'm
it.
43. Yeah.
I'm 39, a little bit younger, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
around the age when it came out, I was like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
this is it."
Yeah, and I was like, this that explains my thing when I had it at 7 years old. I was in the Matrix. Yeah, I realized it at a younger age.
Hmm.
And that's partially why I was bullied a lot because I was, after that, I was way different. You
Hmm.
know, I didn't want to do this thing.
Hmm.
You know? I just wanted to be liberated. I didn't even know what that meant, you know, but I never did my homework. And they're like, why don't you just do your homework? Just why don't you do your homework? I'm like, I don't want to. Why do I have to do my homework? Why do I have to be good at school?
Hmm.
Right? Um, I don't know. That's a whole completely different story. I'm just, going off in this awful tangent here, but that's just to drive in the point to where that a lot of us um, uh, know that something is wrong,
Hmm.
but aren't quite sure what it was. And for me, I was just simply in the wrong role.
Yeah, and that's the interesting
Yeah.
part about it is now that you found your path, something that resonates with you and fulfills you, you are the most disciplined person, ever. Like it's not that you're incapable of sitting down and doing homework and doing the rigorous stuff. It's just that the rigorous stuff needs to fulfill something.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, it's for my patients. It's for my people.
Hmm.
Because why am I doing this in the first place? It is because I want to help. People. And I think about it from time to time, is that, when you're sitting in stillness movement and and you've got that light awareness on your dantian and you can feel those vibrations going up. It's really easy to get caught up on this whole aspect of power, and
Mm,
becoming much more powerful.
mm,
I'm my intent is much more powerful,
mm-hmm,
and we get caught up in that.
mm-hmm,
And it's really, really easy to. Uh, but every time I do, those thoughts come into my head, I have to remind myself is that, exactly what Michael says in the book, you know, or implies in the book, the greatest healers are the empty vessel.
mm, mm-hmm.
Like, who are you being powerful for?
Right.
Right. And, and that goes along with this, this idea of self. And this is really what I've been struggling with too, as far as like the Qigong and spirituality of Buddhism and Taoism. In the spirituality of Buddhism and Taoism, there is the denial of the ego, of the self,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
Because according to a lot of the scripture, the self, to a certain respect, is delusional.
mm-hmm,
Um, and so, how does Qigong fit in? And I was tackling with this idea that, like, okay, we, these spiritual practices are true, and this is what causes our suffering, is this overattachment to the self, right?
mm-hmm,
However, in Qigong, we are sitting for the purpose of raising our vibration, okay? But we kind of teeter along the lines of attachment here,
mm-hmm,
because now we're thinking of me, my body,
mm-hmm,
right? And so that used to bother me. That question is like, okay, how does that fit in?
mm-hmm,
And so that's when I realized that it's the empty vessel that we're trying to strengthen. That idea that we are empty vessels as healers,
mm-hmm,
or as the shamans would say, as Michael said, the hollow bones.
mm-hmm,
That is what's raising the vibration,
mm-hmm,
per se, and it occurs on so many different levels, because we are, as Michael says, we are multidimensional human beings, right? Or just multidimensional beings.
mm-hmm.
And so what exactly is um, what exactly is being raised as far as the vibration is concerned?
Mm-hmm.
And so, one day I was sitting in stillness, and I was able to experience that emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you do achieve or realize that emptiness, that's when insights arise.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I remember before, on my drive to work, I was wondering, okay, where is the Dantian? I mean, we know the location of it, but where exactly is it?
Mm-hmm.
You can't see it on the MRI, can you?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not there.
Right.
And it's just a concept. Like, the chakras are a concept. Where are they?
Mm-hmm.
And so, that day I sit in stillness. I reached that very still point, and this image of a tesseract came into my head. I was like,
Tesseract. Where is that from?
a
That's some
tesseract.
sci-fi thing. Is it Doctor Strange or something?
Well, a tesseract is actually a four-dimensional cube.
Oh, okay.
All right, so it's a cube inside a cube,
Right. Okay.
and that's what the light told me.
Mm.
That's where your dantian is. Basically, our dantian exists in a different dimension
Mm.
than the physical, mundane 3D dimension.
Mm-hmm.
So the tesseract depicts a cube, a fourth dimension cube inside a three-dimensional cube. It's a really interesting drawing. You should look it up in Wikipedia. Um, but that's what the light told me. That's where the Dantian is.
Hmm.
And so, you put this all together, it's hard to be attached to the self when you realize that you're, that not only are you multidimensional, but you are completely connected to source.
Hmm.
Therefore, you are also everything too.
Hmm.
And I mean, I know we're going off a bit on the esoteric aspect of it.
This is great. Hey, we're almost 2 hours into it at this point. You could get as nutty as you like.
Okay, cool. Yeah. It's funny because should I go a little bit more into the acupuncture aspect of it? It's really kind of simple, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have the background ingrained in me as far as TCM physiology, including the organ functions and the channels and the acupuncture points, and as far as treatment strategies and stuff. Just knowing the clinical Qigong aspect just makes things a whole lot faster, a whole lot quicker, a whole lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you do expend a lot of energy, though. That's why my my meditation, or say Qigong regimen, is very disciplined.
Right.
Because I don't have time to mess around.
Yeah.
They say that everyone has their own set amount of Jing,
Mm-hmm.
of Jing essence, their energy that they have, and you'll only really know how much you have when you're in your deathbed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Essentially.
Oh, that's it. Oh, battery low.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can't tell. Right? I mean, there are people out there that have done Qigong, that have never done any Qigong,
Mm-hmm.
that never even heard of Qigong. They live these long ass lives,
Mm-hmm.
like take Frank Sinatra, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know how much Jing the guy probably spilled?
Right.
Like, on top of, rarely sleeping because he's out partying,
Yeah.
And drinking
like a fish.
Smoking cigarettes, all that jazz.
Mm-hmm.
And he lived until 86, and he had all his wits
Mm-hmm.
at 86.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking about if he knew anything about Qigong, could you imagine how much power that guy would have had?
Yeah.
But maybe he did Qigong through his voice, and which is why we all loved him. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe, people like that, when you have like a very, very high level art form or something like that you can express yourself, that can probably negate a lot of these stressors and negative effects that would accumulate otherwise if you didn't have that tool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, essentially, I believe that art itself is a form of Qigong.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Doing any sort of art, dance, things like that. Take the ladies that do the Pilates, here in Chicago, our light space ladies. That itself is an art, and it's healing at the same time. They're doing tremendous work out there.
I mean, essentially, I would argue anything that brings you closer towards, our natural, what our reward systems are, what our reward pathways are, and how we're meant to be in nature. Any of those things that bring you closer to it is a type of practice that can, negate some of these negative forces.
Yeah, exactly.
And art is just a big part of it, because art has been probably with us as long as we've been humans.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And art is the foremost expression of the human experience. We take the most rudimentary, the drumming, or singing, chanting, and shamanic dance, like tracing out the Big Dipper back in old China. I mean, everything kind of evolved off of what our ancestors did, years and years and years ago, and and so art in itself seems to, like, the energy, since everything is vibration, the vibration of art, of digging deep into your own humanity, is also digging really deep into source, into the interconnection, because what you want to do with the art is reach out and really connect with people, and that in itself is healing. That's why art just really soothes the soul. And so there's this very spiritual aspect of it, and that gets us a taste of the pre-heaven void, before duality. A little bit. I'm sure you've experienced that as a musician and as a enthusiast of music, that there's something out there, whether you're playing it or listening to it, you'll forget about the whole duality of life.
Yep.
And you'll experience that thing, whatever that thing is. That's the thing that we're all looking for: that peace, that love, that compassion, interconnection. And so, yeah, you're right. Quite possibly someone like Frank Sinatra found that.
Well, absolutely, because really, like, the dragon I chase in music is this flow state where you hit some kind of a vein, and like you're in this effortless state, and you're doing things that, like, I don't really know where this is coming from. Like, I'm not planning these melodies or these riffs or whatever, but just somehow you don't have to think about it, and something. You're in this flow state, and that's when kind of you relax, and these stresses fall away, and you and there's definitely some kind of a healing element to that. So I guess no matter how many gin and tonics you take down and how many mobsters shitty energy you pick up, a lot of whatever Frank was doing was probably keeping them going for a while there.
And keeping them going for a while, and so, that being said, I don't know how much Jing I have,
but don't waste whatever you have, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Especially at 43 years old. Yeah. Now is really the time that I should, buckle down and really take care of it and really cultivate, because I don't know how much longer I got left here.
And now that you're a healer, you also have a responsibility where the longer you're around, the more lives you can influence and the more people you can help.
Exactly. And that's the aspect that Michael talks about of, being a warrior. Warrior is not always the one fighting, but having a warrior-like attitude, as far as, asking yourself the question, who am I doing this for? And what should I do to help? And so that's why I'm very, very strict and disciplined in what I'm doing, because, this isn't necessarily for me, even though it does make me feel better and rewarded and validated. But it's a way for me, it's my expression, Right. I mean, I could give you the altruist things, like, I want to help everybody. Yeah, that's kind of a given. But it's also, for me as an individual, an artistic expression that that reestablishes that connection with humanity. When I was growing up, experiencing this racism, experiencing ignorance, experiencing bullying, I don't have the greatest relationship with my relatives, and so I don't know what it's like to have the quote unquote big family or a family. I was never good at having friends, growing up. And so, I always grew up with this level of grief and sadness, all because I felt like the world abandoned me at such a young age,
Mm-hmm.
and healing and it is part is is my way to feel like I'm a part of this again, to reestablish
Mm-hmm.
myself in humanity again. And it works that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because, when, you know, in contrast to the way I used to deal with society, like in terms of jobs, people always want a piece of you. You make a little bit of money, people want a piece of you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, whereas in my practice, people come to me in their most humble and human form.
Mm-hmm. Right, right.
They say the number one word that is most humbling and most honest and most human is the word help.
Mm-hmm.
And, as somebody who finds, profundity in that, it's my job to do the best I can for that person, and every hour, every minute of studying Zen Buddhism, studying Taoism, and putting in my minimum 3 hours of cultivation goes into that person,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's quite deep for me,
Yeah.
and it keeps me hopping and keeps me alive, uh, and so that's what, and the stillness to me is so important
Mm-hmm.
because it's what allows me to, again, raise that vibration to stimulate these acupuncture points through the needle. And through that needle, you could push the acupuncture point wherever that goes. And interestingly enough, after I initially met Michael back in 2010, my whole world has changed. Um, I don't even know what's real anymore. Like after
Mm-hmm.
that day, like what did I experience? Michael's. Michael, I remember like after doing a sitting, this was at that 2010 workshop. After doing a sitting, Michael was talking and then he looked like somewhat over my head and kind of freaked out. He's like, "Who is that?
Mm-hmm.
Who is that?" It was almost like he was like panicked.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "What?" And I was like, "I didn't see anything."
Mm-hmm.
And then, he's like, he told me to approach him during break, and I asked him,
Mm-hmm.
like, what's going on? It's like, there was a kind of a middle-aged older man kind of standing next to you.
Hmm.
And it turned out to be my dad.
Oh, wow.
Because, and Michael,
You recognize him by his Ramones t-shirt.
yeah, exactly. But actually, it was funny. He was wearing the Ace of Spades jacket.
Oh, close.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. He actually used to wear my Ace of Spades jacket all the time. It was weird, but he wore it. But anyway, like I asked Michael, like, what was he doing here?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, he was giving you support.
Mm-hmm.
He was saying that you were in the right place.
Wow.
And he was the one initially, when I was even younger, like about 4 years old, that I was going to be a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I don't want to be a doctor. When you think about doctor, you think about the lab coat,
Yeah.
and you think of like, opening up people and all that. And like, I don't want to do that, and he said, well, you have this thing about you that, you can actually help people.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if you knew, but in the Filipino community, there is kind of like this myth or folklore that if you are born breech, meaning that you're born feet first,
Mm-hmm.
or as my parents would say,
Right.
born standing up and talking back, right? You will have these innate healing powers.
Really?
Yeah, and I was born breech. I was born feet first,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember when I was a kid, my dad would receive phone calls, at the house, and he would overhear them like, yeah, he's here. Yeah, okay. Apparently people in the Filipino community were asking around for breech-born babies to help them out with certain things,
Wow.
and sometimes it's pains,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But a lot of times it's it's lodged fish bones, and this is so odd. I remember, like, I was so young. I forgot how, maybe like 4 or 5, something like that. Someone would come over to the house. And my dad would be like, you should rub his neck. And I was like, oh, okay, that's weird, So I rubbed the guy's neck, and he did this big gulp thing,
Uh-huh.
and he's like, oh, it's gone.
It was a fish bone?
Yeah, it was a fish bone.
Wow.
And so, and like it would happen all the time at any hour of the day or night, And the very last time
They'll
that I
just
ever
call
did,
on you?
yeah, they would just call my dad, and my dad would, get me to stop what I was doing. I would probably be, playing Atari or something,
Mhm.
and like, all right, I'll just rub people's heads or necks or whatnot, and they would feel better. Or
Mhm.
I would dislodge their fish bone. It was the oddest thing.
Hmm.
And I remember, and this was, geez, the last time I ever did it was back in 2000. And by now, I'm betting 1,000 here. I'm like this freaking Shoeless Joe or Mickey Mantle of like dislodging fish bones. Even better, I was betting 100% here. And I was like, this was like at 3 o'clock in the morning. My dad received this phone call, and it's one of his friends, very, very desperate. I heard your son is breech born.
Mhm.
You got to help me. This fish bone is killing me, and I just scheduled, a surgery. Well, actually, her surgery was going to be like within the next couple of days. Like, I don't want to do the surgery, like, you got to help me. I was like, all right, fine. So, he comes over, or she comes over, and there it is. I rubbed the throat, and she'd been going through this for like months already. And it's getting worse and worse. And, now shit's getting infected. I'm sorry. Now it's all getting infected.
That's fine.
Right?
You could throw some swears around.
All right, cool. So, she calls, and so I say, okay, come on by. She's been going through this for many months. It's all getting infected. And I was like, all right, come on by. And so, I rubbed the throat, and it dislodges almost immediately. And the inflammation goes down. And so she didn't have surgery. So, that was my...
That's crazy. I've never heard of this thing in the Philippines, I guess your father is really the one that kind of put you on this path early on, even without really, I guess, knowing the full extent of what's possible.
Yeah, exactly. And oddly enough, he was the one who was trying to take me away from it also. It was so weird.
Huh.
But it was probably like more out of, because he built this family business thing,
He was
just more out of
charging
that.
people for this.
No. No, it was a family business. He created, real estate and income tax.
Oh, okay. And he just wanted you to
He wanted me to
keep that going.
continue with that, but I didn't want anything to do with that, for several reasons. Because it contributed to my anxiety and all this stuff. And so he was trying to convince me to not go into, the healing industry and stuff like that. But, before he passed away, he said, he gave me a call. He said, you know what, you're right. This is your path, and then after he passed away, I continued, and I didn't take a break from school. And then, I met Michael sees him, and apparently, Martin and Natalie from Austria, they've seen my father at the workshops. Like, we saw your father. I'm like, yeah, he's here all the time. He's there, giving me support.
He was wearing a Fishbone t-shirt.
I was wearing a Fishbone t-shirt. Huge fan.
Wow, that's really awesome. Well, listen, Sonny, I have people coming in here now to record the next thing, so I'm probably want to start wrapping it up here. But I think definitely let's have you on again, man, because you were worried that you wouldn't have enough to talk about, and we're like over 2 hours into it.
And I feel like I just went from one tangent to another.
Oh no, man, it was great, and like I always go through these to find like one like little short like intro 15-20 second clip or something that's kind of like full of inspiration. And you just kept dropping one after another. I'm gonna have some homework to do. So this is great, man. I really appreciate you talking. Sorry about the time mix up and all of that. Any like final thing you want to say, and definitely shout out your your website and your clinic if anyone is in the Chicago area. How can people find you?
Well, people can find me on my website. It's purplecloudcenter.com, all one word. I'm in the Rogers Park neighborhood, Purple Cloud Center for Eastern Medicine, at 6710 North Clark. You can email me at purplecloudcenter, all one word, purplecloudcenter@gmail.com. I mainly specialize in stress, anxiety, PTSD, depression, and the things that stem from there. A lot of times it's insomnia, a lot of times it's migraines, back pains, things like that. So those are my main specialties.
If someone is not in the Chicago area, do you do distance work as well?
I do distance work. I still have yet to do the verbiage on my site as far as advertising it. So unofficially I do. If you want distance work for me, just please let me know. You can email me at purplecloudcenter@gmail.com. And the distance treatments, I work directly with the energy body. So a lot of traumas, spiritual traumas can be helped
that way, right?
Yes, to a certain extent, physical traumas can be helped, but definitely emotional stuff. Again, stress, anxiety, PTSD, depression. That is my main specialty.
Perfect. Very very cool.
Yeah, and so if you're in the program and you're just starting out, just remember it takes a while. Don't try too hard. Just allow things to be. All you have to do is do your sittings, and do your movements. Okay, and when you're doing your sittings, don't focus too much on that dantian. Don't focus too much on being that power. Take the Zen route, and the Zen route says it's a goalless practice. All right. It's a goalless practice because you are focusing on now at the moment, and that's where the energy is. The energy is now. Okay. And those, the best healers in the world throughout history were the masters of the present moment. And so that's why sitting is so important.
Awesome. That's very good advice. I'm gonna have to go back through this and take some notes.
All right.
Well, thanks a lot for talking to me, Sonny. This is really awesome.
It was fun.
Let's do it again. Maybe bring Nisa in next time.
Yeah, totally. That'll be fun.
Awesome.
You hear us banter. All right. All right, take care, Paul.
Thanks,
I
Doug.
appreciate you having me.
Yep,
Thanks.
Have a good one.
All right, you too.
when the sun rises from the east, we should feast on it.